break from our COVID-19 phone-ins over the holidays, but then last week a few things happened that meant it felt very important to bring back microbiologist Dr. Joseph Blondeau sooner than planned, certainly before the holidays. Last week, parts of eastern Canada saw the number of Omicron cases grow rapidly. In reaction to a possible fifth wave of COVID-19, the government here in Saskatchewan has made booster shots available to anyone over 18. They've also shortened the period of time for when you are eligible for a booster. Those shots started just today, and we know people lined up early in the cold to get them. And then there's the whole issue of travel. We know this all means that you have some questions. So give us a call right now. It's 1-800-716-2221. You could email bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter @blueskycbc. Again, that telephone number, 1-800-716-2221. The email address, bluesky@cbc.ca. We are also live streaming today's program on the CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages. You can ask your question in the comments section, and we'll get them to them as quickly as we can. Dr. Joseph Blondeau is head of microbiology at Saskatoon's Royal University Hospital. He teaches about infectious disease at the University of Saskatchewan, and he has very kindly agreed to appear on the program again today because, well, he's a nice guy. Hi, Dr. Blondeau.
Hey, Garth. How you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good, and I'm in for Turtleneck Tuesday as well, so
Right.
I'll send a photo as well. I'm doing okay, thank you.
Yeah, I meant that quite sincerely, though. How are you doing, given that, you're in the middle of all this? How are you and the folks you work with making out?
Well, I don't think it's any surprise that we've been under a massive amount of work-related pressure over the last number of months due to the pandemic. And it's really taxed our system. But once again, though, I would say that I never cease to be amazed by the resilience of our staff that keep showing up day after day after day to do what's so important in terms of, testing for this particular virus and for other infectious diseases as well. Myself, I'm tired as well. And, we would all look forward to that day when this is just a bad memory. And we get back to living life a bit more normal, things that we're used to prior to the pandemic. But we've got a little ways to go yet in order to be there, but I do think that that's coming.
Let's start with booster shots. Just who can get them as of today?
Anybody 18 years of age or older and have been 3 months since their last vaccine, as I understand the latest announcements. So it's wide open. And so Saskatchewan and Ontario, the two provinces in Canada that have reduced the age eligibility down to 18, and also the time period from what was originally 6 months to 5 months to 3 months. And there's no secret as to why this is being done, Garth. It's being done to boost the number of antibodies or the amount of antibody that you have in your body, because we know that as antibody levels drop off, which is a natural phenomenon, it reduces the effectiveness of the antibody against Omicron. But once you get a booster shot, you boost your antibodies back up to a level which is more protective. So that's the reason why it's being done. And I, like you and everybody else, would encourage people who are eligible to get out and get vaccinated.
Now, for people who haven't yet received that third or in some cases fourth shot, how protected against Omicron would they be? Say, you got your last shot 6 months ago.
Yeah, so here's one of the big unknown questions that's not yet answered in the Omicron literature. We talk about antibody all the time, and we talk about neutralizing antibody, but we fail to have in our discussions the fact that there's a second arm of our immune system called the cellular arm. That's T cells. And some of the literature that's circulating this morning indicates that the mutations that have occurred in the Omicron variant are not mutations that seem to have affected the T cell or the cellular arm of the immune response. In other words, those mutations don't affect that aspect. And so the data that continues to be out there seems to indicate that people who had past infection or people who have been previously immunized may still catch this virus, but the likelihood of having severe infection seems to be substantially reduced. Now, I'm going to put a caveat in here right away, Garth, because every expert in the world is saying we still have to wait a little bit more time to make sure that this trend holds true, meaning that this virus is associated with a milder form of the disease, so that we don't give people the wrong impression. But the early data seems to indicate that either previous infection or previous immunization, even if your antibodies have waned a bit, still seems to offer protection against severe disease.
Okay, well, to that, we got a call from somebody couldn't stick around to go on the air, but simply wanted to know if people who have had COVID can get it again, and whether we're seeing that.
Yes. So people who have caught COVID can catch it again. And that seems to be some of the data out of South Africa, where the largest databases exist right now. A number of people there who are getting infected with Omicron had been previously infected with an earlier version of COVID-19. And so again, continuing back on your initial question there, our antibody responses that we currently have may not prevent us from being reinfected with this virus. But what they will do, or what they may do, certainly in the vast majority of people, particularly if you have a booster shot, is prevent you from getting severe disease. And so I've said before in this show, Garth, and I'll say again, I think if any of us happen to catch this virus and all we have are the sniffles, maybe a little bit of nasal decongestion and being a little bit uncomfortable for a day or two, I don't think any of us care about that. What we care about is the progression of the disease to something more serious requiring hospitalization. And at this point in time, that seems to be lesser with the Omicron variant.
Okay, let's go to the phone lines. David is in Saskatoon, has been waiting patiently. Hi, David.
Hello, Garth and Dr. Blondeau.
Hello.
I have two related questions concerning the booster shot. I heard a doctor on CBC, I don't remember his name, saying that after 7 to 10 days after the booster, the person is completely vaccinated. Everyone else says full vaccination is 2 weeks after the last shot. I got my booster a week ago. Can I consider myself fully vaccinated, or will it be in another week? And the other question is, we were originally told to wait 6 months after the second to get the booster. That's what I did. And now it's 3 months. Does this difference in time affect the degree of protection and the duration of protection?
Two good questions. So I'll deal with the first one first. Yes, there is some literature that has evolved. It indicates that about 7 days after your booster shot, your antibody level is back up. I still tell people that 7 to 14 days is my comfort zone. So it'll be up to you to decide whether you feel most comfortable after 7 or 14 days. But some literature is now saying that after a week, your antibody level is back up. In regards to the second question, that is, antibody to this virus wanes over time. That is a natural occurrence. It's a natural phenomenon. And in the beginning, before the Omicron variant became available, or was ravaging the world, I should say, the interval of 6 months was a respectable interval, because we knew that people had protective antibody for at least that long, and certainly it was protective against Delta. The reason why that interval has been shortened now is because there's good evidence to suggest that after 2 doses, when your antibody starts to wane, you're less protected, but when you have that booster dose, it increases that antibody level back up. So I don't think that there's any concern here about the change in time. It's merely to allow people to get a booster dose sooner as opposed to later, but I don't see that as a concern at all.
Okay, David?
And what about duration?
Oh, so it's likely, and Dr. Shahab, I think, has already made reference to this. He actually foresees that other booster doses may be available in time, and will really depend on what the pandemic situation is going forward. As we've heard so many people say, nobody has a crystal ball, and things may change as the pandemic changes. But I think it's realistic to expect that at some point in time in the future, whatever that interval will be, we may require another a dose of the vaccine.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, David.
You're most welcome.
Let's hear from Leah on the line in Saskatoon. Hi, Leah.
Well, hello. Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, Leah. Thank you.
Good,
Go ahead.
Thank you.
This is my first time calling in. So we've had, me and my husband have had all 3 shots. I'm pro vaccines, and my twins are going on the 3rd of January, and then they'll have their boosters. So how much protection do we have with this booster? Does it really cover the new variant, that new one that's out?
So some of the data that's available, Leah, suggests that if you've had your 3rd dose, your protective antibody level, and again, we're just talking about antibody now, is as high as 80%. There are some other numbers that suggest it's a little bit lower. But once again, this is only referring to antibody protection. It doesn't take into account the cellular arm of the immune system, where others say that also contributes to protecting you from severe disease as well. And of course, that's absolutely correct. But I think that we will see these numbers change over time as more and more data becomes available. But right now, some of the numbers that I've reviewed are in that 80% range if you're boosted.
Okay, so if I landed in the hospital, I should survive.
Yeah, I mean, the likelihood that you'll land in the hospital is substantially less. You have to keep in mind that while we're talking a lot about Omicron today, we still have Delta out there. And I think that our concerns are greatest in the unvaccinated population, or in those individuals who may not have as strong an immune response as other individuals and could still have some vulnerability. Then are people that either are double or single vaccinated. But in saying that, I would strongly encourage everybody who's eligible for a booster dose to get it.
Okay, I have a 2-part question that I wasn't going to ask, but hopefully you may touch on it. And if you don't, that's okay. So there's 3 people that I know that are anti-vaxxers, and it upsets me that there's fear around it, right? There's fear about putting poison in your body. And what would you say to somebody like that?
Well, these individuals may have been vaccinated as children against many of the childhood diseases which we now have vaccines against. And in fact, they may have had their children vaccinated against vaccines which prevent childhood diseases. And so I think we need to understand whether it's truly anti-vax for everything or just for COVID-19. Which seems to be the case for a lot of people. And a lot of them are hesitant because the vaccine was argued to be too new a technology.
Hello?
Amount of safety data and efficacy data. Now that
we lost you for a moment there, Doctor. Can you repeat what you said?
Hesitant about the vaccine is that it works, it's protective. And it in a way increases the likelihood that you will not end up with severe disease and even dying. And for that reason, I see it as being extremely important.
Okay, Leah, thanks for the call.
You were on. You were thinking the same thing I was, or I was thinking the same thing as you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leah. Got an email from Karen. Karen asks, how long should someone who is a breakthrough case of COVID-19 wait before getting a booster? For example, you were fully vaccinated, got COVID anyway. How long?
I think it's 4 weeks now, Garth. I'll have to check that to be sure. If anybody out there knows the answer, but I believe it's 4 weeks.
From The beginning of
from when
symptoms,
you-
or
Yeah, I think it's from the recovery period. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to text while we're answering questions, and I'll get that answer.
okay. We got this question on Facebook. Nitch wonders, do the rapid test kits we have received provide accurate results of the COVID variants, specifically Omicron?
It won't necessarily tell you that it's Omicron. It will simply tell you whether you're positive or negative.
But it will work on Omicron. You'll get that positive or negative. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's hear from Jordan. He's on the line in Edmonton. Hello, Jordan.
Yeah, hi. Nice to be here today, and thank you for being here, Doctor and CBC. I'm calling from Edmonton. I live with a weak immune system. I also got my second vaccine in June, and ever since I've had my vaccines, I've noticed I've had a lot more mucus in my thing. I don't have colds or nothing, but it seems like I'm always packing up mucus a little bit. Would it be, and I come up for my third vaccine here right away, I qualify now. Would it be recommended I still go for that?
I believe so. In regards to the mucus, I'm not aware of that as being an issue associated with the vaccines, but I would tell you the same as I tell anyone else who asks for this. I would go and I would make this known to the folks at wherever you're getting your vaccine from, because they may have some additional information that I don't have. And with you and your specific condition, it's also important for you to refer with your healthcare provider as well. In order to make sure that there's no reason why you would be contraindicated in receiving your booster dose. It's always important to do that. But I'm not aware of any concern. But again, I would just ask those questions to make sure that you have all of those answered before you get the jab.
Perfect. I also have a second question. When I got my second vaccine, 2 days later, my body was tensed up. I had Pfizer. I'm feel great now. I'm glad I got vaccinated. I get to go see my great grandma and stuff. And
yeah, of course,
she's 90 years old age, right? So I'm really happy to get that. My daughter's coming on my third one. My son's 9. He's been vaccinated for his first shot. My concern is when 2 days after when I seized up, I had to go to the hospital. My muscles were just really tense. Is that probably just due to my health condition, maybe, right? But they were hesitant about me having my second one, and now they're saying I can have it within like 2 weeks again, right? So
yeah.
It was just kind of frustrating. I guess it's all a learning curve, and I really appreciate you guys taking my question.
You're most welcome. I'll just say to you that, in my own family, when I was vaccinated, both first, second, and third doses, it hit me a lot harder than it did my wife. My wife seemed to get by with relatively mild or no symptoms, and I was more symptomatic. And so I think each individual, we respond differently to it. And in your particular instance, there could be some other factors which may be mitigating your response. But again, that's the type of thing that you have to have a discussion with your healthcare provider in order to fully understand, any risks or lack of risks that you may experience or may come your way with the vaccine program. But I would reiterate to you, I'm not aware of anything that's a contraindication based on what you said.
Doctor,
okay.
And much appreciated. Much respect to you all.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
So, listeners, do you have any questions about booster shots, COVID-19, the Omicron variant? Well, we are once again joined by microbiologist Dr. Joseph Blondeau. So give us a call right now with your question. It's 1-800-716-2221. You can email bluesky@cbc.ca or tweet us at Blue Sky CBC. Again, that telephone number, 1-800-716-2221. We're also live streaming today's program on the CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages, so you can ask your question in the comments section. We'll get to them as quickly as we can. But again, that telephone number for your questions is 1-800-716-2221. Let's take one more call before our news break. It'll be Rob in Saskatoon. Hi, Rob.
Hi, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
Just fine, Rob. Thanks. Go ahead.
Good. So the question that I have is we have an 8-year-old, and I know that the current recommendation is to wait the full 8 weeks before she gets her second dose. But I also know that there's a number of folks who have been recommending that children in that 5 to 11 age range, if they are 3 weeks past, maybe should go and get their second dose a little bit early with the arrival of Omicron.
Yes.
Is that good advice?
Yeah, I'm waiting to see whether or not that's an official recommendation or not. So I don't want to say it is because I'm not sure. We had changes even last Friday in regards to eligibility, but the intent there is just to make sure that that whoever's the recipient of the vaccine has high level of antibody. That's the intent. The reason why 8 weeks was chosen as the interval between the first and second dose was to collect safety data just to make sure that there was no safety concerns that would emerge as a larger percentage of the population received the vaccine than what was recognized in the clinical trial where there were only thousands of participants. So that was the reason, as I understand it, between the 8 weeks. The fact that it's now being recommended by some to shorten that interval is not, in my opinion, a concern. But at the same time, I don't believe that that's an official recommendation yet. But if it is, I wouldn't be concerned about it.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for a news update and then back to our conversation with microbiologist Dr. Joseph Blondeau. If you have any questions about COVID, Omicron, booster shots, immunity, give us a call right now with those questions. It's 1-800-716-2221. You could email us. It's bluesky@cbc.ca. On Twitter, we're at BlueSkyCBC, and we're live streaming this program on the CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages. Put your question in the comment section. We'll get to them as quickly as we can. Again, that telephone number, 1-800-716-2221. David Shield joins us now with a news update. Hi, David.
Hi, Garth. A man from the Black Lake First Nation has been charged with second-degree murder. Jarek Staffelny was arrested for the crime last week. RCMP began investigating the death of Arlie Cook after his body was found in a home on December 14th. There's more confusion into who allowed the Catholic Church to walk away from its obligations to residential school survivors. The current Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations says the former Conservative government dropped an appeal of a decision that allowed the Catholic Church to get out of paying millions of dollars in restitution. However, Minister Mark Miller can't release the details proving that because they were labeled as secret. And people wanting to get their vaccine boosters in Regina this morning were turned away. People believe the old Costco building was a walk-in vaccine clinic. Now the health authority says there will be no walk-ins allowed at that location for the rest of the week. And I'll have a full newscast for you coming up at 1:30.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
David Shield on the news desk this afternoon. Back to our Blue Sky today, and it's a question and answer program with the microbiologist Dr. Joseph Blondeau. So any questions you have about the boosters, Omicron, mask use, rapid tests, whatever your question is, give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Again, that's 1-800-716-2221. The email address is bluesky@cbc.ca. Our Twitter handle @blueskycbc. Or you can follow this program today on our CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages. If you're following along on Facebook, just put your question in the comments section. We'll get to them as quick as we can. Okay, let's go to this question from Martha. And first off, Martha thanks you for providing all the helpful information over the last almost 2 years. And that said, Martha's question is, given the Omicron situation, how safe is it to fly domestically? I'm fully vaccinated with the booster shot. I plan to fly to BC to visit my daughter over the Christmas holiday. She is also fully vaccinated. Of course, I plan to wear a mask while traveling, but I'm wondering, is it risky to be flying at this time? It would be a direct flight from Saskatoon to Vancouver.
So, Garth, this is one of these questions that I just simply can't give a yes/no answer to, but I can say what others are putting out there for opinions. Every traveler, in addition to being vaccinated, needs to take every other precaution that's out there, including masking and distancing as best you can and whatnot. But there's also some recommendations that with Omicron, because of its transmissibility, that you look at where your destination is and what case rates are like there. So if you're going from an area of low case rates to high case rates, you might want to re-question your decision to do that because the likelihood of exposure is greater. Now, having said all of that, once again, we do believe, based on the data that's available at this point in time, that if you're fully vaccinated and you're practicing these other measures, the likelihood of infection would obviously be reduced, but more importantly, the likelihood of severe disease would be reduced. But again, nobody can tell you that it's zero. And I just want, for this question, it's a great time for me to bring something up out of Norway. In regards to transmissibility of this virus, there was a social gathering in a restaurant in Norway, and of 111 people who attended the gathering, 80 people caught this virus. 60 additional people who weren't at that gathering but in the same restaurant also caught the virus, all believed to be a super spreader event on the same evening. So what does that mean? It means that the transmissibility of this virus is different than anything we've seen up to this point in time. And relatively short exposures to an infected individual is likely going to be enough in order to transmit the virus. How you can take that information and process it related to whether you should travel or not is going to remain an individual decision. But certainly, if your destination has a lot more cases than we have here in Saskatchewan, then you'll have consideration. And that's the best answer I can give on that.
All right. Got a question from Brenda on Facebook. Brenda writes, I have 2 autoimmune diseases, and I'm concerned what these multiple vaccines will do to the immune system.
Again, I'm not sure that these vaccines are going to be harmful in any way. The vaccines are very, very specific in regards to what they're trying to get your body to raise antibody to, and that is the spike protein of coronavirus or COVID-19, and to nothing else. And so I'm not aware of any data for any autoimmune disease which has been published to suggest that by being vaccinated, it actually exacerbates your condition or contributes to problems going forward. Who knows? New data may show something differently, but at this point in time, that's the literature I'm aware of. So I can't draw on anything to say that that's a concern.
Okay, got this question from Alan, also on Facebook. Alan writes, if you had AstraZeneca for the first shot and subsequently 2 Pfizers, do you still need a booster?
So the information is that if you, I'm just going to, if you've had, if it's been 3 months, okay, I have the answer to this, Garth, because I asked for it this morning. I'm just going to, Garth, a couple of things. The question earlier about if you've had COVID, when can you get vaccinated? Mm-hmm. The answer that came back is as soon as you've recovered and out of isolation. Okay, so as soon as you're... So if you're no longer symptomatic and you're past your isolation period, then you're eligible. So so that's a change because it was 28 days. Okay. And then the other question that I'll give you the answer to is that so if you've had Pfizer or Moderna, based on this information this individual asked, and it was 3 months or more after your last dose and you're considered to be boosted, but if it was less than 3 months after your last dose, then you're eligible for another booster. Okay. That may seem like a little bit confusing, but what's saying is that if you've been more than 3 months, you're considered boosted. If you're less than 3 months, then you're eligible for another dose. So in this case, a fourth? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to the phone line. Sean is in Saskatoon. Hi, Sean.
Hi there. I have a question that I think just got answered, but just to confirm. I was lucky enough to get a travel dose because I knew I was planning on traveling to the States this year. That's now been called into a lot of question based on what's going on with Omicron. However, I got mixed doses originally. So I got Pfizer, then Moderna, and then I got another dose of Moderna right at the start of September because they were doing the travel dose. Would that answer regarding it being 3 months also hold true there? Yep. As far as I understand, yes. And okay, and so June and then September.
Right. So and then whether or not you're eligible for another dose at some point in time will be subsequently determined.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate everything you guys are doing with this.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Now, we got an email here, and they did want us to use their name, and given the topic, we won't. Anyway, I have a family member who has somewhat grudgingly been vaccinated, but they've not vaccinated their 6-year-old child as yet, partly due to concerns the vaccine hasn't really been tested that much on children. This family member is an intelligent, thoughtful person. What could I say to encourage them that it is safe? They have vaccinated their child for other diseases.
Well, I think that's what you have to draw upon, is to simply say that, the reason why you give a vaccine is to prevent a disease from occurring. And we know that some of the early childhood diseases can be quite devastating, leading to lifelong complications or even death in some situations. And the data coming out in regards to COVID in children has been such that a lot of people have looked at the literature and have seen that the likelihood of severe disease in children is much less than it was in adults, and said, okay, well, the likelihood of my child then catching this is reduced. But I would remind everybody that those numbers are not zero, and we have had children that have had severe disease. We have had children that have had long COVID, and for some children with long COVID, it's unclear whether or not they will completely resolve all of their long COVID symptoms over time. And so, like any other vaccine, this vaccine is designed to protect you from getting to that particular stage. And if you believed in vaccines from some of the earlier childhood diseases that you had your child vaccinated for, then you should be believing in this vaccine as well, in my opinion. That's what I would say.
On that topic, we got this question the last time you were with us. We've had protesters in front of CBC in Saskatoon claiming that thousands of children have died from the vaccine.
No.
Fair enough.
No.
Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. No.
We got this question from Shelley on Facebook. I have a question about the rapid tests. Why is it suggested you only use the test if you're asymptomatic? Are the tests not accurate if you have symptoms?
No. It's in order for you to determine whether you're positive before you get there and start spreading it to anybody.
Oh.
Right? Because, it's as simple as that. If you're symptomatic, then you should probably be restricting your movements anyway. But the test is designed to let you know at the earliest opportunity whether you've been exposed to the virus and you test positive. It's as simple as that.
What if you do a rapid test and it is positive? Then should you book yourself in for a PCR test or just isolate it?
You certainly can, but our recommendation is if it's positive, you treat it as it's positive and act accordingly.
Okay. Maureen on Facebook just disappeared. Scott, we got this question from Scott. Scott says, I'm concerned about my 2.5-year-old daughter. Should we be taking any extra precautions with her? She can't be vaccinated because she has asthma.
Well, I mean, the precautions that you would take is you need to limit exposure to other individuals. So again, I'll remind people that we actually have two very important viruses that are circulating in this country right now. We have Delta, which we know has been responsible for all of the fourth wave, and we now have Omicron. And so they're both here simultaneously, and we know a lot about Delta. We don't know as much about Omicron. And one of the ways that we do know of protecting people is to limit their exposure to other individuals. And so in regards to precautions, I actually, Garth, think it's absolutely okay to be asking people in my social circles or anybody who I would choose to interact with whether or not they're vaccinated, in order to make sure that I would protect my family, and I'll make no apologies for that. And I don't think anybody else should either.
Okay. Maybe she was just too young to be vaccinated at 2.5.
It could, well, yeah, it could be. Again, on specific cases, it's hard to know exactly, but yeah.
Okay.
But you need to take these precautions. So.
Okay. To the phone lines, Daryl is in Regina. Hi, Daryl.
Hello. I ended up getting what everybody's calling the Trudeau special. I got 2 AstraZeneca and 2 Pfizer, so now what do I do?
So you, when was your last dose?
September.
Yeah, so I actually think, and I'll get you just to double check this, but you may be eligible for a booster now, because I think that the thinking is that the AstraZeneca, they're resetting the clock in regards to when you started to get your Pfizer, so you may actually be eligible for a booster dose at this point in time. So I would just call in to see if you can make an appointment. Just tell them, and they'll tell you right away whether you're eligible.
Yeah, I've got both answers though, so nobody's sure.
Yeah, well, they should be sure because the recommendations changed on Friday. And because they changed on Friday, it just may be taking a little bit of time to percolate down through all of the various levels. But my understanding is I believe you are now eligible for another dose. And I would stand corrected on that if somebody wants to correct me, but I don't think I'm wrong.
Okay, Daryl? Okay, thanks, Daryl. Be careful out there.
Yep.
Let's hear from Faye in Regina. Hi, Faye.
Hi. I have received all of my shots for COVID, and I'm on immunotherapy treatment. I'd like to know what the interaction is between the two of them.
I'm not aware that there's any interaction between those, except that we know that if you're on biological agents, that they can impact your immune system by making it a little less efficient in terms of developing antibodies. And so as a consequence, we don't have a measure that we can use to say whether or not you have a good level of antibody or not. We just know that research has shown if you've had multiple doses of the vaccine that you have good neutralizing antibody. So I would say that in a person like yourself, you should have had your second and you should have been eligible for your third dose. And I suspect that you'll be eligible for a fourth dose in the coming months, depending on how long it was since your last dose. And I would also say to you that it's probably also important for you to also limit the number of individuals who are unknown to you or outside of your social bubble that you come in contact with until we learn a little bit more about this virus and what its impact is going to be. But yeah, the concern being on a biological agent is that it could weaken your body's ability to develop antibody, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not protected.
Okay.
Okay,
All
Faye.
right, thank you.
Thanks, Faye. We'll go back to the phone lines just a couple of moments, but just what do we know about Omicron as of like today? Because we've heard that it's more virulent, but maybe not as severe. What is the latest?
So, Garth, there was just some data released the end of last week out of Hong Kong, where they did a study where they looked at the replication of this virus in the upper respiratory tract versus the lower respiratory tract. So, for the sake of a definition, the lower respiratory tract's in your lungs. And the upper respiratory tract is in your nose and your mouth and your throat and that sort of stuff. And what they actually found was that Omicron seemed to replicate 70 times faster in the upper respiratory tract, so the nose, mouth, throat area, and much slower in the lungs. And as a consequence, so it was faster in the upper respiratory tract than previous variants, but slower in the lungs than previous variants. So this is part of the argument why this virus might be more like the common cold and less like a virus causing severe disease, simply because if you're not getting rapid replication in the lungs, then it may prevent this phenomenon called the cytokine storm, where your body's mounting this massive response to the presence of the virus. But because the virus is replicating so fast and the immune system is responding so quickly, that people end up with severe disease. And so that data is not yet peer-reviewed in the peer-reviewed literature, but it was released early because of its findings and is still awaiting peer review. But they showed a number of data sets and photographs with it as well, which seemed to be fairly convincing. So I think that that's an encouraging piece of information if it holds true, and may explain why this virus could be a bit more like the common cold and less like, say, the Delta variant and severe disease.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I read last week that there's some evidence that the Omicron virus may have picked up some genetic material from a common cold virus.
Yeah, from other coronaviruses, Garth. That's not putting me on the spot. That is data that now seems to be based on some sequencing data by investigators, which actually showed some nucleic acid as part of the Omicron genome, which was associated with seasonal coronavirus. Now, just to repeat again for everybody, seasonal coronavirus is the number 2 cause of the common cold. Behind rhinovirus, which is the number 1 cause of the common cold. So if, in fact, Omicron has characteristics of seasonal coronavirus, then that could also explain why it's behaving more like an upper respiratory tract virus versus one that's causing severe disease in the lungs. So I would see that as a bit of encouraging information as we await more data to become available.
Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Maria is in Swift Current. Hi, Maria.
So I just have a happy solstice, everyone. So a question about mRNA. I was just kind of wondering how it functions. Like, does it have, because you're imprinting a memory, but I'm like wondering, does it have a finite memory? And if you're creating a memory, are you pushing out another one?
Yeah.
And just kind of, I don't quite know how it functions, I guess.
So just so you know, we all have messenger RNA in our bodies every day because it's a normal part of our cellular functions. And so what a messenger RNA is it's the part of the genesis of a protein which carries a message from nucleic acid to ribosomes in the cell for the ribosomes to translate that message into a polypeptide, which then gets folded into the active protein. Now, to your question specifically, what do we know about the messenger RNA? Messenger RNAs are actually rapidly degraded after the message has been translated. So it doesn't hang around. We have cellular enzymes which are responsible for degrading that memory so that it doesn't hang around. So after the message has been translated, messenger RNA is degraded, and that's it. It's gone. But now you have a protein which the body sees as foreign and develops antibody to it. So I think that's a part that needs to be cleared. And messenger RNA is a normal, everyday function of the cells in our body. So we all have messenger RNA, whether we think so or not.
Okay, we got this question from Marianne on Facebook. How long should you quarantine after testing positive but are not symptomatic? And how long would it usually be that you would test negative after testing positive but remain asymptomatic throughout?
Yeah, so the recommendation is that 10 to 14 day window. And I think 10 days, is the current recommendation. And if you're using an antigen test, I can't tell you how many days after your quarantine you would remain positive. But I know with a nucleic acid test, you can remain positive for up to 3 months. So I'm not so sure that I would recommend people do a lot of testing of themselves after they've resolved, unless they believe that they've had a new exposure or if they have new symptoms. But if you're asking me for a specific time interval in between, I can't give you one because I don't know if that one exists.
Okay. A question here from David. David writes, people of Saskatchewan have recently been told to get a booster shot of the COVID vaccine. David's question is, does it make sense to rush out and get a booster shot of the current vaccine, or should we wait till Pfizer or Moderna update their vaccine to account for the Omicron variant?
Yeah, so the prevailing opinion right now is that we don't need an Omicron-specific vaccine. What we need is booster shots. And if we wait for an Omicron-specific vaccine, it could be at least another 100 days, maybe longer, before we'd actually see that in production. But we know that the current vaccine protects against Delta, and we know that if you get a booster, it gives you more protection against Omicron. So the prevailing opinion is we don't need a new vaccine at this point in time. We need people to go and get boosters.
Fair enough. Tracy on Facebook, thank you for this. My daughter has a 2-year-old and a 1-month-old. We both have had our booster, and we want to see them for Christmas. We'll do a rapid test before seeing them. Anything else we can do?
Again, I think that those are all the right things to do. You just need to make sure that you're restricting the number of people that you're interacting with at this point in time, because even though, the number of Omicron cases that we've isolated in Saskatchewan are not as numerous as they are elsewhere in the country, the fact that it's here means that it's probably here. And we will likely see more cases going forward. So it's really about a concerted effort to limit the number of people you're interacting with, take those tests, and make sure that everybody's vaccinated. That can be.
Okay, let's hear from Kathy. Kathy's on the road today. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, yes. Thank you very much for taking my call. I'm just a little confused, and it's regards to two early callers. So the first early caller said that he had the first shot was AstraZeneca, and he was followed by two Pfizer vaccines. Okay. So then you said, he wanted to know whether or not he should get a booster or not. And you contacted you came back with the fact that, okay, so if he had the two Pfizer shots and the last shot was more than 3 months ago, he was considered boosted and he did not need any more shots. Then another caller phoned in a little bit later and he said he had the quote-unquote two-dose special. He described as two first AstraZeneca shots and then followed by two Pfizer shots. And he said, what should he do now? And his last Pfizer shot was in September, which would make it more than 3 months, right, at this time, from his last shot. So he, according to your first answer, should be considered boosted. But you said that he's eligible for another shot. So I'm just a little bit confused because that was two separate answers to relatively the same question.
I think that the reason why there's a bit of confusion, I thank you for pointing that out, is because I think we're at this point in time for these arguments, we're ignoring the previous AstraZeneca vaccines and resetting the clock from when he started with the Pfizer vaccines. So that's why the answers sound a little bit differently, but I think I was saying the same thing. And that's why I said he may be eligible, and I asked him to double check that I wasn't misinterpreting my understanding of the current recommendations. But I believe we're resetting the clock from when he started the Pfizer vaccines and ignoring the AstraZeneca.
Okay, we're going to move on to Ingrid in Regina. Hi, Ingrid.
Hi. Yes, I just wanted to talk about the combination of the flu shot, which I had. I had the first two Pfizer shots, and then I had the booster about probably a month after my flu shot. So I just wonder how all these things, I know that flu shots tend to have some of the COVID variants, right, in terms of SARS and H1N1, right? They have, aren't they protecting us from that as well?
No.
Not SARS.
The flu shot only has in it influenza A and influenza B, but it could have multiple strains, it does have multiple strains of influenza antigens as part of the makeup of the vaccine. It doesn't have anything to do with SARS or COVID or anything else. So those are two separate. No. H1N1 is a designation of influenza. That is not a designation associated with COVID. So two separate things. So you would have had flu vaccines specifically to protect you against influenza A and influenza B, and you would have had your COVID vaccines specifically to protect you against COVID.
Okay.
The two of them are not related.
Sorry. Okay. And so in the future, might we need to have two shots, like influenza plus, COVID shot?
Well, technically it could be possible going forward that maybe there'll be one shot that will include everything. I don't know that. I'm not aware of that research going on, but it's always a possibility. But as influenza is a very seasonal virus, we know when the flu season normally stops and starts. But with COVID, because of it's here around the year round, it may be that flu and COVID will continue to need to be separated for the time being until we see whether or not current strains become more endemic as opposed to pandemic. So that's a big if at this point in time, but a possibility.
Okay, Ingrid.
Okay,
thanks. Just on that, I think a lot of people that were going to get a flu shot have had it by now, but just for sake of clarity, should there be a waiting period between getting the flu shot and a COVID vaccine?
No,
No?
no.
Could
There's
do
no
it the next day?
recommendation to wait. You can have them both at the same time.
All right. And I'm going to read this last email before we run out of time, and it's Cindy on Facebook, and Cindy writes, I think Dr. Blondeau should be getting some recognition or an award for his ongoing sharing of his expertise. He has been providing a great public service, and kudos. And I second that, Dr. Blondeau. Thanks so much.
Very kind. Thank you very much. That's a very nice sentiment, but I'm happy to come on and try and do what I can, so thank you.
Well, have a happy holiday. We'll talk again in the new year.
Happy holidays to you and everyone else that's listening, and be safe, and we'll see you in the new year.
Dr. Joseph Blondeau is a microbiologist and teaches about infectious disease at the University of Saskatchewan. He joins us from time to answer your questions about COVID. Well, looking at the birds out in nature, one thing we've been able to do during the pandemic, even despite cold weather, on tomorrow's Blue Sky, Trevor Harriott joins us for Birdline. So make sure to give us a call or drop us a line. That's tomorrow, Birdline, here on Blue Sky. Talk to you then.